Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with a brand new connection. Hey, Alice.
Hey, man. This is amazing. Thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you for being here. And we were talking before we recorded that we have a mutual friend or a mutual connection that connected us. And so, Melissa, thank you for connecting us. I'm just going to drop the dirt. Melissa and I worked in a very toxic workplace for a little bit together. And that's so we connected in that misery, but we learned a lot from that moment. And so, like Alice and I were talking about before we started recording, is, it brought me to this place. And so everything has its purpose in our lives. I'm learning as I get older. This is this is such a journey. And so I just appreciate you wanting to come on and share your story and where this moment in your life triggered something related to something in your own family and caused you to create something that's helping other people. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a privilege and an honor.
Maybe to get us started, you can paint the picture of a little bit about who you are and what your life was like leading up to this moment that really triggered this change or this impetus to create what you've created.
So, I'm Alice Chun. I'm the CEO of Soul Lake Design. I'm an inventor and I'm a social entrepreneur, which means that our company is a for purpose company. We work to help communities in need all over the world with our life saving products, which are solar lights and solar power banks. I grew up in Korea. I'm 100% Korean and immigrated to the United States when I was 4. And growing up, I grew up in a neighborhood outside of Syracuse, and I
Mm,
was really teased a lot and beat up because I didn't look like everyone
mm,
else. I was the only Asian in my school. And I remember, after traveling and talking to so many children around the world, I tell them about my story of how when I was a little kid, I was very poor and lived in this very poor neighborhood. And I didn't fight with my fists. I ended up becoming a fighter, but I fought with the light in my mind and the light in my heart. And tell the children that it's so important for you to remember that we're all empowered and have this light that's always inside of us. And you have to keep fighting with that light no matter what and never ever give up. Going back to our solar lights, which is an incredibly powerful tool in terms of ideologically, the sun is the most powerful source of energy that comes to the earth every day. But the light of our hearts and minds, if we fight with that light, it's
mm.
even more powerful than the sun, far more powerful than you could ever imagine. And so this kind of is the impetus of what I try to share whenever I travel to different regions to provide literally a useful tool to survive, but also what I think is even more important is the tool of being able to have hope in yourselves and in the future. That is far more powerful than getting food or water or utilities sometimes. And I've seen this happen where I've been to a disaster zone and have come across a small village in the hillside where they might have committed suicide because they feel like no one was going to come to help them.
Mm.
And so if you don't have hope, you're still going to die. And that was a really powerful lesson for me when I discovered that.
When you were growing up, you talk about you didn't fight with your fists. Was that something that came from like your family? Did they teach you this, or was this always something that just kind of was you? That was like you
Yeah,
had this hope and light.
actually, I grew up well, like Asian parents are extremely harsh and they're very strict and controlling. But the neighborhood that we were in, there were a lot of kids beating other kids up. Like that was a common thing in school, kids hitting each other and things like that and making fun of there was
Right.
always this kind of toxic environment. And you'll see that no matter where you go in every very underserved community and underserved schools, you'll see a very similar kind of environment, and it grows. And so this is something that we need to address. And as you know, with this past year of so many school shootings, it's just incredible how prevalent it is and how we need to change our mindset about the environments where we're learning and working. So after we moved out of that neighborhood, we went to a suburban neighborhood. It was a lot better, but still, I was still the only Asian kid in my school and like upstate New York. And I see this a lot with families that come from post-war histories where the parents are kind of in survival mode,
Mm,
and they treat their children as if they have to do everything to survive as opposed to thrive.
right.
And so nurturing is kind of put on the back end versus giving giving a space of exploration, discovery, wonder, awe, beauty. Like those things are not important, but I believe they are so important,
Yeah.
so critical, and absolutely must be part of the way that we provide humanitarian aid. That beauty, wonder, and awe are just as important as utility, because that, my friend, provides hope.
Yeah.
So in any case, I grew up, very challenged, but then it's a paradox because you look at the histories of people that are successful and they all come from a very paradoxical condition where you're forced to be challenged. You're
Yeah.
forced to fight in different ways, mentally, even physically. And because of that paradox, it makes you tough. It makes you gritty. It makes you persistent. It makes you disciplined because part of human nature to thrive and also struggle and learn and, be thirsty for knowledge.
It's interesting though, because I mean, there are a lot of people that that struggled in a similar situation that do
That's
not
true.
have that hope. And when you were saying it, I was thinking this, and then you kind of came back and kind of negated it a little bit in my head. But do you think, and I kind of maybe now I think this is that this hope and this idea for such a great opportunity out of everything, and this kind of feeling right here as a child, is that something of privilege for a lot of people? Is that like, like in the sense of people that have to kind of fight to survive, right? They're fighting for food on the table. There's survival mode. There's not this opportunity or this openness to be able to have those hope, feelings or wonder or thinking. Or am I like way off base? This is a new thought that just popped to my head based on what you said, but I'm wondering if, you know, people in more privileged areas are afforded that more.
I don't know. I mean, I think it really depends on the environment. I think
Yeah.
it's both nature and nurture. I think it's both behavioral and environmental. Sometimes it depends on the parents, and maybe they grew up in a more challenging environment, but their children had a more entitled environment, but they were able to, ensue and instill the principles and the
Yeah.
values that they learned throughout their journey. And some may not. Some may be ashamed of it. Some people are ashamed of that. And
Yeah.
and so I think it's really depends on the situation and the environment and the kind of characters that we're talking about, because I think each childhood is different. Each
Yeah.
child is different. I don't want to taint any kind of situation where, because I don't know
You're right.
what they've been through, or I can just kind of talk about my experiences and also my experiences with students. So I was teaching for 20 years at Columbia University, at University of Pennsylvania, at Parsons the New School, and I came across students from all walks of life, from very underprivileged communities to very extremely entitled communities where, like at Columbia, I think one of my students was the one of the heirs to the Kellogg
Wow.
fortune,
Yeah.
and very nice fellow, but very entitled, but had a very, very good disposition. And there were other students, many different students that, you know, were from Florida
Hey,
and they lost their house. No, like in a hurricane,
yeah,
they had Hurricane Sandy or one of the hurricanes came through and they completely lost their house. They're, very upper middle class neighborhood and they completely got their house destroyed and they
right.
were living in, a makeshift kind of a trailer for a while and the kid was still coming to school and very tough and very ambitious. And so these kids are, all and
And
I love kids so much. I mean, I've always whenever I was young, whenever there was a party, I would if there were kids around, I'd spend my time with the kids and the animals, not the adults, and I still do that till this day. And I kind of think about my recent trips where I'm going into war zones or red zones. Like I came back from Ukraine and I went to Turkey to deliver lights to children and people living in tents in Turkey, but children with PTSD in Ukraine. And people always ask me, why are you going to these war zones? Aren't you afraid you're going to get killed? And I think, I'd rather be killed doing something good to help people than to be, dying of old age in
mm,
an old folks home or, crossing the street and getting hit by a bus.
yeah,
But I feel like every day, I think God has given me the courage and the strength to go into these places to help people. And, I feel better about, and
I
I'm
can
very
hear it. Yeah.
excited to help whenever I can. But,
No,
the whole reason why I started to invent
yeah.
was, this point where I decided to really focus was because my son was born with asthma and we would go to the hospital all the time and
Mm,
there's no other like helpless feeling
right.
than to see your child not being able to breathe because their lips are literally turning blue in front of your eyes and that kind of fear and shock, and I always say there's a saying, a worried mom does better research than the FBI. So, yeah, me being a former professor, the data showed that the pollution in the air is really killing our families. I mean, the issue of health, autism, in relation to pollution and climate change and natural disasters, it's parallel. So, there's no denying the effects of what's happening to our planet. And you ask yourself, well, what can we do about it? I'm just one person. What can I do? But I believe that small things matter and every person matters. And even when you do something small, it matters
Hmm.
because if you think about it, we all did something little, right, to cause what's happening to the climate, throwing away a plastic fork or plastic bottle or, cranking our air conditioning to the fullest for the whole summer, things like that. Those are all small things, but as a collective, what we've done is really endangered the whole planet. So, in any case, the worry about my son, and finding out the data of 75% of the pollution coming from buildings, not the cars and urban areas, and the spike, a very high spike in asthma and autism. I decided to focus on solar energy and I was a material technology specialist in Columbia and at Parsons teaching about material technology, and early on I was sewing solar panels to fabric and thin plastic because the trend in material technology is everything's getting thinner, lighter, faster, and smarter. And with that technology, when the Haiti earthquake happened, I was teaching at Columbia and I quickly turned my studio around to be an innovation studio to help Haiti
Mm,
because enough was enough. All of these natural disasters coming more and more frequently. I just, I knocked on my dean's door and I pleaded with him. And he finally said, yes, you can, change your studio around to be an innovation studio to help Haiti. And that's when we realized 2.6 billion people live without access to electricity, and they're using kerosene to light their
Mm,
world. And they're spending, if in Haiti, they're living on $3 a day, spending a third of that income on kerosene. And I thought, like, if they could save that money,
right.
they could use that for food, clothing, education, and it was a win-win situation if they could use solar. And I researched every freaking solar light out there on the market, and they were all heavy, hard plastic. And I designed ours with origami, which is the art of folding paper. So it collapsible, and you can fit hundreds in a box because they flat pack, and then
Mm,
when, deployed, they pop into a beautiful cube. And so they're extremely simple, but really they're beautiful too. And a lot of the children, when they see it, they think it's magic. And in fact,
mm,
I've been into the hillsides of Haiti, and they start crying because they think there is a kind of mystical magic about it, of seeing this flat thing pop open into a bright cube. But yeah, that was a thing of pivotal circumstances.
yeah.
But I always think that I always go back to my thoughts about innovation and invention as something that has to do with lines of time. So the Greeks believed that there was two lines of time. One line of time was Chronos, which is an old figure with a beard and a cane, predictable, consistent. Another line of time, his name is Kairos, and he had wings on his feet, and he flit and flew about, and he was unpredictable, unsequential. They coexist, and when those two lines of time intersect, those are the moments of invention.
Mm,
Those are the moments of opportunity. So, going back to what you were saying, Matt, earlier about these moments in your life where things pivot,
yeah.
we all have these moments where those two lines of time intersect, and it's up to you to have the, sometimes it's courage, sometimes it's just, revelation, sometimes it's, being in a state where you're able to lean into that moment as opposed to lean back and be a witness versus leaning in and becoming a
Yeah.
participant.
Were you working on some of this stuff before that Haiti earthquake, or was that really kind of like you feel like that was like, gotta hit the gas pedal, let's go? Not the gas,
Yes.
the electric car
Yes.
gas
Like
pedal.
I was already working on this issue of solar, of
Hmm.
innovating solar, of harnessing solar and making prototypes, but then getting the idea of the utility, the why it's so needed, and the how do we help people
Yeah.
question. How do we help? That was the big kind of shift, was, oh, we can apply this technology. We have a reason for this technology now,
Right.
and its application. And then
It almost
we
makes it
could,
more
yeah,
granular.
right,
It almost makes it
exactly.
like taking it from you were working on these solar applications that, we have a worldwide problem here, but now I can help an individual. I can help
Right.
one
In a
person.
small way.
Right.
Yes, in
Or
a
big
very
way.
small way.
I
Yes,
would venture to say a
only
big
if it's
way.
collective, only in a big way if it's done,
But for
with
that one
everybody.
person, but for
Yes,
that one person, it very well, or that one family, it could be a very, if one
it is.
third of the money they spend a day
Right.
is saved by something that you've created, that is very big for that world,
Yes,
that
you're
little world
right.
that they live in. And so
Yeah.
I can see how that would trigger you to be like, oh, this has more purpose, because you
Yeah,
think globally, you're like you were saying, I'm one person. What can I do? Little things will add up eventually. But now,
right.
like, I could do a big thing for this one person or this small group of
Exactly.
people.
Yes. And that matters. And
It
I
does.
believe in that so much, that every small acts of kindness are so, so important to global health. Yeah, that's thanks for,
Take
distilling that so clearly.
for you,
And
you deserve that. It is
uh,
big. I mean, we can see grand picture what you're doing is big. But I'm thinking as that little kid, that doesn't know any, like I don't know that this kerosene is going to hurt me long
Right.
term. I don't know that this is not what everyone else lives like. But then I love the image you created when you told me about seeing the kids look at it and thinking it's magic and being that light, because now it's playing like this metaphorical role in their life as well, right? Of lighting up their world and wonder and hope and imagination and all these things. Like how did they make this? How does it fold down? How does it work? All those pieces that you are, by what you've created, you're giving to these children or adults or whoever by a product. Like I feel like it's so much bigger than just providing light or electricity.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. You really get it because I believe that too. I think that the story behind this light is so much more powerful than the product itself because when these, especially the kids that I saw in Ukraine, some of them had lost, witnessed their whole family being shot and had
Right.
witnessed, you know, gotten their legs amputated. Several children I saw that had their village bombed, and it's so important that even after the light is gone, the solar puff, our product, it's called the solar puff, is gone, that they have this narrative in their head that they are powerful, that they control their future, that the world doesn't control them, that they have this ability to overcome these incredible, like, terrible obstacles. And what was really fascinating for me, seeing these kids in the hospital beds in, these different, awful situations where they witnessed, they were found after 2 days hugging their mother after the mother died in the train
Yeah.
station bombing. And I was like, you wouldn't blame them if they were filled with hate,
Hmm.
these kids. You wouldn't, if they were hateful and like revengeful, you wouldn't blame them because of what they've been through.
Right.
But none of them had any hate. It was, they were grateful. They were so happy to get this, this gift and the
Yeah.
story, and they related to the story. And, and there was this little kid who had a broken leg and he was 2 years old. He's like, he gets his light and he runs away limping,
Yeah.
as fast as he can, and then he comes limping back and he's dragging his friend, "Give my light, give a light to my friend too." Like that generosity and kindness.
Yeah.
And I just, it's just amazing how resilient people are.
Yeah. And I'm sure you see that more. I mean, I'm sure you see it in adults, but at these kids, I mean, kids just have this, they're not tainted yet, even with that. I mean, that description of their environment and what they've just survived. Somehow that light and that wonder and that curiosity,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
thinking too, like, I don't know, I'm very obviously privileged to live in America and things are around me and I can choose whatever. But I'm thinking the power of seeing someone like you that has created a product bring that to them, because, you know, we'll buy things at the store or they
Yes.
maybe have bought things before and they don't think
Yes.
about it came from somewhere, someone created it. But now you are putting a face showing that like, oh, people can do things like this. People can create this, which
Yes.
creates another,
Level
path for them. Right.
of knowledge. Yes, yes, it's opening their eyes to possibility
Hmm.
because a lot of times when I go to places, me being a woman and the girls are thinking, "I could be an inventor too."
Right. A CEO.
That's a huge thing, like, in places like Haiti when I would go, and also the little girls that I saw in Ukraine and Turkey. Part of that, I tell them when I come, that's why it's so important for me to cross boundaries and go into these war zones, to travel halfway across the world so I can tell them in the flesh, "You're important. You matter. And we haven't forgotten about you. And you're going to get through this."
there's a big power in influential people hitting on people's lives in a certain point. I guess, as a child, seeing someone like you can create a new moment for them in the future. I'm trying, as you tell this story, I'm thinking of myself. When I was 8, my mom was killed in an accident, but I didn't have people like that inspired that hope. It was this 8-year-old brain that was so fearful that if I messed up or I screwed up in some way, someone else would abandon me because I figured, my mom abandoned me. Not on purpose, but that was what my brain was processing. And so I didn't have that light. I didn't have that wonder because I didn't see anyone out there that expressed that they had a dead parent and they were good. They were okay. They had created something. They had moved on with their life and I felt very alone. So I'm thinking of these children that you're seeing in these war-torn areas or natural disasters, and someone's coming in showing kindness. Not that people around me weren't kind, but you coming in and giving them something of utility, of something that can, one, help them in some way, but also you're just creating this unknown path for them by just being there and by doing that. And I think there's such value in that. And I think we don't stop to think about those moments. And so thank you from that 8-year-old version of me that was searching for something. Thank you for doing that for the other little 8-year-olds around the world that have faced far worse than I faced.
Oh, Matt, you did have the light in you. Your mother's love was the light in you since you were 8. She's always been with you the whole time, loving you.
And being fully transparent, I didn't feel that way. I felt very scared. The people around me did the best they knew how to do with the tools that they had, but it was just surviving. And that's really why I asked you about that 4-year-old version of Alice who had the light, who didn't fight with her fist, but fought, with the light. And because it's kind of foreign to me in a way, in a sense that, so curious how
But you did. You
I
did
did.
fight.
Now I
Look
did.
at you now.
Now I did. Yeah, and I'm not dogging on that. I'm not saying that there's a negative component to it. I think there is. I think it's just there's so much value in what you're doing for these little children and thinking back like what if there was someone like you with the utility or something that I needed at that time? Who knows where I would be, but I wouldn't be here. And so, I am thankful for the journey. I'm thankful for what I've learned throughout the journey. But, I would just, everything that you're saying makes me think of that maybe still a little unhealed version of me from way back when.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, totally. That's the value of these stories. And I think, you even mentioned it. Your product is amazing, right? Your product can do things that they need. But the story and the reason why and what you can create and the ripple effect that the story can have, right? Far beyond the life of the product, the ripple effect that story that you're creating for people is so
Right.
impactful. And, with the Life Shift podcast, it's for me, it's like, I want every story to hit the ears of the people that needed to hear it the most, the people that felt alone, like that little 8-year-old version of me. If I had heard a story of someone being like, they had a dead parent and then they were super successful, maybe I would have felt different. I wouldn't have felt alone in that situation. And so that's what you're doing with every time you go and you share or someone shares your product and the story behind it. I mean, that's big. Not to like toot your horn or anything, but like
Oh,
good for
thank you
you.
so much. I actually, I people are like, "Oh, I had the privilege of having Hillary Clinton visit my house and we were on, this docu-series with her and Chelsea, but I actually feel like I'm just a poor I'm just a poor Korean girl that had the privilege of having an education. And and every day I feel like I'm just grateful to be alive. Like I should be dead right now. And if I can do anything to help other people, that's my purpose. And even though like we're a very small company, we're not huge at all. And we, you know, But every time someone sees our light, they're like, "Why isn't this everywhere?" I'm like, "I don't know." But
But I think it's finding the people, or you're bringing it to the people that need it most, and
exactly.
you're
Yeah,
changing
and I
lives in
think
multiple ways.
that's what I believe in, and that's what I'm trying to reassess. Because, like, when we first started, everyone's like, "Market it to the camping industry,
Mm,
market it to the outdoors industry," and I'm like, "Well, but that's not all it is. We did this because we really wanted to help these
right.
communities that are really suffering, and this would really change their lives and even save lives."
It's really the
And
story.
and
I
people
mean,
really didn't want us to, like, the marketing people didn't want us to, like, talk about our humanitarian side, and now I'm going
don't
all
listen to
in,
them.
like, I'm just basically, this is what we are. We're not gonna fake it, this is
No.
exactly why we're doing what we're doing, and we're gonna show you what we're doing as opposed to downplaying it.
You said you were just like a poor girl that had an education. Lots of people do that. It's something that you did with that, though, because, there are other people in your circumstance that were able to get an education, but something set you apart. That something lit that fire to keep going and help other people. And it's just, I don't know. I look at it as an anomaly more than I look at it as, like something that, because you were talking about how lots of successful people have this kind of paradoxical upbringing, right? They have this struggle, but lots of people have those struggles and don't make it that far. So there's something in you that light seems to be very solar powered.
You're so
Do you
kind.
find a way? Do you have to Are there moments in which you don't have that light? How do you
Oh,
recharge that light?
absolutely, absolutely. And I have to say, it's not easy. Anyone so, like, you really have to love what you do, otherwise you're gonna quit.
Right?
And and I also think, like, at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, "How is this, like, bigger than myself?" Like, once you come to a point where you discover something that is meaningful and for you, whoever whatever it may be, that this thing is bigger than yourself, then the courage will come. And for many people, I don't, you know, going back to your discussion, that some people never get to a point where they feel like there's anything bigger than themselves.
Hmm.
That's just the way that they've been wired or, you know,
Conditioned.
conditioned, exactly. And some people are conditioned to question and have curiosity and wonder and explore and test boundaries. And that, at a certain point, you're going to discover a narrative that is greater than yourself and that you're passionate about. And I feel like that's very lucky to be able to have that moment. So, and if you're able to have that moment and not be afraid
Yeah.
to take a risk, that's the other step, is having the courage to go into the unknown. I do believe that everyone has the power inside them to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it takes a lot of things that you just mentioned, the grit and the courage and those pieces. When you need to recharge, how do you take care of yourself? Or is there something that you do to keep going? Or is it just an,
I think, like, I've definitely been, in very low parts of my life where I just wanted to crawl under a
Mhm.
rock and die. And I've been, like, in bed, not being able to get out of bed, on the
Yeah.
bathroom floor, in the fetal position for hours. And once you start doing things like what you're doing, Matt, of, like, sharing and being public, and people are going to hate you no matter what, you know, no matter how much good that you try to do, how much, you know,
Yeah.
hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, and sincerity and authenticity you put into something, you're still gonna have people that hate you. Like,
Yeah.
really hate you, like, wanna kill you, kind of hate you, which I've I've, experienced as well. And, it's unfathomable to people like us, but it's out there.
Yeah.
And for people like us who have an incredible amount of empathy, it's debilitating to think that someone would want to kill you. It's like,
Fortunately,
anyway,
I haven't
so
had that.
so I'm laughing about it now, but
That's scary.
there are definitely, you know, bad times that you have to get through. And I just say, step by step, just one little tiny 1%, just the next day, doesn't have to be a lot. And have a small group of friends
Mm,
that are there to support you, that you can really call friends. You don't need a lot of them, but just to have a few around, surround yourself with like-minded people and
yeah.
keep the negativity away from out of your life.
I mean, which is hard to do. And
It
just
is.
even when you're not in a running a company or inventing new products, it's hard. But I also think, we also have to give ourselves grace as humans because we're going to make mistakes and
Exactly.
we are going to have good days and we're going to have
Mhm.
bad days and we're going to be
Right?
sad
Right?
because we're human and that all should be okay, you know? And I think
Yes.
sometimes we, like you were saying earlier, people, in rough situations, they don't talk about it because there's like some kind of shame that comes with it or something. And it's like, well, if we pick that apart, it was not a circumstance that they could control. And why
Right.
are we taking on the shame? But even if you
Right.
have the shame, that's okay. Acknowledge it, do what you need to do from it. And so I think sometimes we're
Right.
afraid to have more than two
Absolutely.
emotions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think
Because
that's
we are
society.
human. Because the struggle is that we're just struggling to be human.
Yeah. I would imagine that someone like you with a social focused organization, products that are trying to do good for an individual, for a community, for the world. I would imagine what gets you is when someone questions your motives. Do you ever have that situation?
Yeah.
They're like, why are
Yeah,
you doing this?
definitely.
Are you doing it for
Yeah.
real?
I know. I mean, luckily I don't have a lot of those, but
That's
every
good.
once in a while I get a hater. I mean, like this one person that would email me constantly and their Gmail would be Alice must die at gmail.com kind of
Why
stuff.
though?
Like I just, you
Why?
can't let those people
Mm-mm.
into you just have to, you know, just cut it off at the pass and like get back to the zone of the people that are like-minded and the support
Yeah.
that keeps you going and gives you energy. Like those things will drain you, will
Yeah.
drain your energy, and your energy is far too valuable and important to waste on things like that because other people need you.
What's the hardest part of your life? Like, what's the hardest part of being you as either as a person or as an owner of a company or a CEO? What's the hardest part?
Right now, since right now, day to day, we're about to launch a new product
Mm,
and like it's called a Mega Puff and it's just a bigger version of the solar puff, but with phone charging as well. Cause every time I go places, the issue of phone charging, that's a lifeline. If you don't have your phone, communication is life. So, and even in the poorest regions, they'll have like 3 or 5 phones because one's always charging.
mhm.
So I've been meaning to do this for a long time is like a lower priced phone charger and an origami light that pops into a big cube. And we're going to be launching it on Kickstarter. And it's just been consuming my life right now in terms of trying to get this ready to launch. And like from prototype stage and working with the factories and then finally getting the final prototype and getting the content ready and the marketing ready and videos, and it's just been like I get up at 3:30 in the morning sometimes, and then I go to the gym, and that way I can get stuff done before 9 where people start bothering you, right? So, anyway, but
That's
yeah, and like making sure my son is okay, making sure that he texts me back and calls me and things. That's difficult, but you
yeah.
know, it is I love him so much that, I just let him get away with anything, which is not good. But anyway.
It's totally fine. I don't think you're the only mother that does that. What is your favorite part of being you and what you do?
Oh, my favorite part is actually delivering the lights, like no matter, oh my God, when I went to Ukraine, it took 4 days to get through the border. I had to take 2 trains to get through the border of Ukraine. And when I finally got to the hospitals, there's just, no better feeling than to be able to share these lights with these kids that are, have gone through so much. And
Yeah,
the mothers start crying. Oh my God, I'm going to start crying.
it's okay.
And the mothers start crying, and, and the aunts are in the room and they're like, can I have one for my child at home? And, and it's just, I feel like I've made a difference. I feel like these kids are going to take away this. And even in Turkey, these kids were in these tents. Like, I went to this tent camp. It was like miles and miles of tents.
Mhm.
It looked like it just rows going into infinity. Each tent was a classroom. And I guess they bus the kids in during the day and bus them back to their tent camps at night.
Mm.
And I was telling the story of, of how you guys, the kids, you have this light inside you and you better keep fighting with that light and you matter. And I'm here because you matter and we haven't forgotten about you. And the kids started crying. Girls started crying because, like, she lost her parents. And the people were translating for me and they're like, she loved your story. She was so touched by your story because of what she went through. And to be able to know that that little girl is looking at that light in her tent, knowing that
Yeah,
she has this light inside her and she's gonna get through this.
yeah.
I
It's
guess that's the best part.
yeah. And I'm sure in a way there are probably multiple facets of it, but I'm sure in a way it reminds you when you're like, "Oh, I have all this extra work to do to get this whatever is done, but the end result is going to be so valuable," right? I'm sure those moments probably pull you through some
Right.
of the more tough stuff, the
Yeah,
logistics that you don't want
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
deal with.
And
You know, I
yeah, I know. And it's also like in the beginning it was more like I know that by being successful with this company, I'm gonna help educate and also the environment, that it's going to impact my son's grandchildren's lives.
yeah.
And so basically, and then, I learn all these new things along the way.
There's so much value. There's so much like hidden value in what you do, for these people, the people that get this. There's so much, right? Because like we've already talked about, your story gives them this hope and this light and this wonder and this curiosity and like, how did she make this? Oh, and like I could be this person someday. But then also you have this hidden like education component of it and the value of this solar component and this energy that is creating and how that all works. And so there's like on the surface, it's a product, but there's so many layers to what you're offering the world. And I can't stop coming back to this idea of this like younger version of you that's just fighting with that light, and how that girl wanted everyone to feel that way, and then you created this product. I mean, I feel like, I don't know you beyond what you've shared today, but that's what I see. Those are the lines I see. I'm wondering if you could go back to 4 or 5-year-old Alice that's, living in the space that didn't feel as safe as you maybe wanted it to be. Is there anything that you could tell her about this journey that she's about to go on?
Basically, one of the things that people ask me is, what would you tell your younger self? And, that quote by Teddy Roosevelt, man in the arena, that you're going to go through really hard times. And that man in the arena is going to have blood and sweat and tears and dust in your face. But all of the naysayers are not in the arena with you. So don't listen to the naysayers.
Mm.
because a lot of times people give up because people, are
Yeah.
either tell them, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
A lot of people do that. A lot of people absorb that. A lot of people don't have that fire. And so I hope people listening to this episode feel that fire and see that something that seems maybe like a small thing, although you keep describing your thing as small and I don't see it as such, but something they can do something to help one other person. And that's adding
Right.
value to the grand scheme of things, the big community,
Absolutely.
the globe of
Absolutely.
people, because you don't
Yeah.
know the ripple
Yes.
effect.
Yes. Yes.
You
And
don't.
that ripple effect is powerful.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing this story. I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit of how people can find out a little bit more about what you do and how they can connect with you if
Oh,
that's something
sure.
you would love.
They could just go to our website, solite-design.com. We also have a Give a Light page where it's an opportunity for our customers to buy a light to give to Ukraine or Turkey, or every time there's a disaster, we always send out newsletters about what we're doing.
Perfect. That's amazing.
And if you want our lights for camping or outdoors, you can get them for yourselves, of course. And thank you, Matt. This has just been a really meaningful and, auspicious interview that we've had. And, I'm like in tears from our conversation. I gotta go buy a tissue.
Well,
I gotta
they're
go
not
get
very
some tissues.
expensive. We can get you some tissues. I'm gonna definitely I'll have the links for everyone listening, everyone watching on YouTube. The links will be in the show notes in the description so that they can connect with you. Hopefully everyone listening is inspired to
Yes.
donate in some way, by the give a light or whatever it may be, and help other people, or instead of camping, buy one and then give it to someone that might need it, and do a little service of kindness to other people, because again,
Yeah.
never know the one
Right.
thing you do for someone else, what that will change in them, that will then change someone else, then will change someone else. So thank you for being you, Alice. I really
Thank
appreciate.
you, Matt. This has been such fun and such honor to have this discussion with you. And please keep in touch.
Of course. So if you're listening right now and you enjoy this conversation, it would be super helpful for a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts. I don't really know what it does, but apparently it does more than just make me feel good. So with that, I will say goodbye, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Matt.